This episode was originally released as a bonus episode of Real English Radio and is now being released to the public. Enjoy. What's going on, my friend? You are listening to another episode of Real English Radio. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, and I found this subreddit titled, Am I the Asshole? So apparently on this forum, people tell a bunch of different stories and then they ask the public, Am I the asshole in this situation? Or is the other person the fucking asshole in this situation? And I found a really interesting one about a woman who is married to this guy who apparently is leaving the house to his daughter instead of his wife. And when I say leaving the house, I mean like when he dies, he's going to basically say, I'm the owner of this house, but when I die, my daughter will become the owner. She will inherit this house, not my wife. And his wife is really upset about that. She's not happy at all with the fact that she is not going to get the house when her husband dies. So now I'm going to read her story to you, and then you can let me know, what do you think? Is this lady the asshole, or is her husband the asshole? All right, let's get right into it. So she says, my husband, who is 65, and I, who am 47, have been married for 10 years. After my husband's retirement party, the discussion of wills and inheritance came up, and my husband informed me that he is leaving our marital home to his daughter, who is 30, in his will, which left me feeling completely blindsided and shocked. So let me explain a few words before we continue. The retirement party is literally just the party you have when somebody finally retires. So when you retire, it basically means you decide to stop working for good, forever. You're not working anymore. You've worked all the years you want to work. When it's time to retire, you resign from your job and then you collect your government pension or something like that, right? So at this party, they started talking about wills and inheritance. Now, your will, W-I-L-L, in this context, refers to the legal document in which you list all of your final wishes and desires, explaining how you want people to deal with your property and stuff like that. So if I put in my will that I want my children to inherit all of my properties, my diamond rings and my gold chains, or all my money, I have to explicitly write that in my will. And then when I die, my lawyer will probably take a look at it and make sure that my kids get all of my possessions that I specified in my will, right? That's a will. Now, an inheritance is basically the money or property or possessions that you receive because somebody said in their will that when they die, you're supposed to receive these things. So if you have 3 houses, $10 million, a Mercedes and a Porsche and a collection of rare diamonds, if you put in your will that you want your kids to inherit, which is the verb, you want them to inherit all of your possessions, when you die, they will receive all those possessions, and all of those possessions will be their inheritance. So the verb is inherit, and the noun is inheritance. So the discussion of wills and inheritance came up, or arose, or was mentioned at the party, and her husband informed her that he was going to be leaving their home to his daughter and not to her. And this left her feeling completely blindsided. Now, to be blindsided means to be taken by surprise or caught off guard, especially with negative information. So I believe this term comes from American football because in the game, you tackle whoever's holding the ball. And sometimes the person holding and running with the ball gets blindsided, meaning they get hit from their blind side, the side that they literally cannot see. You see what I'm saying? So imagine some negative information like, hey, honey, this house that we've been living in for 10 years, when I die, I'm going to give it to my daughter and not you. That information, in this case, came as a shock, right? She was blindsided. She was surprised or caught off guard by this information. That's what she's saying, all right? All right, let's continue. She says, I'm aware that due to our significant age difference, I will most likely outlive my husband by many years and will probably have to spend the last decades of my life alone. So I was really upset, but also angry to learn that I will most likely be kicked out of our house after my husband's death and left homeless. My husband explained to me that I knew the house belonged to his late wife, who inherited it from her parents, and that I couldn't possibly expect him not to leave his house to his daughter. So let's recap. She's saying, I'm aware, like I know, that due to our significant age difference, I will probably outlive my husband. All she's saying is I will probably live longer than my husband. That's what it means to outlive somebody, to live longer than them. So because of our age difference, how old is he? He's 65 and she's 47. So she will most likely live longer than him. And she will have to spend the last decades of her life alone. Or she could just get a new boyfriend, right? So, and she was really upset and angry to find out that she will most likely be kicked out of the house. Now, to be kicked out of your house means to be forced to leave the house. If your parents kick you out, they say, get the fuck out. You're smoking weed at my house, fucking girls on my couch that I paid for, eating all my food and shit. Get the fuck out. That's what it means to kick out somebody, right? So she's saying, I'll most likely be kicked out of the house when my husband dies because my stepdaughter is going to inherit the house. And she says her husband explained that she knew that the house belonged to his late wife. Now, I don't mean late like she arrived late to the party or anything like that. If you hear the word late before a person, it means that they have died recently. Not just recently. It's not always recently, but it means that they're dead. So my late husband, it means that her husband is dead. My late wife, the husband is our late president, the late blah, blah, blah. It means that this person is no longer living. So she knew that the house belonged to his former wife, who is now dead, and that his former wife inherited the house from her parents. So the only reason that the husband in this story is now the owner of the house is because his wife died and he inherited the house from her, but she inherited it from her parents. So this house has been in the family for at least 2 generations. And so the woman telling the story apparently already knew that. So her husband was saying, you can't possibly expect me to leave the house to you and not my daughter, right? This house has been in my family for at least 2 generations. This is my daughter. The house used to belong to her mother. How could I possibly give the house to you? That's what she's saying. All right, let's continue. So she says, I replied that the house now belongs to him, and as his wife, I have a right to my marital home, and it's not fair that I will be kicked out of our home after I spend so much time and effort redecorating it and making it my own, and become homeless after his death because I am a housewife and I have nowhere else to go. He has an obligation to ensure my financial safety after his death. Jesus fucking Christ, man. So before I continue, let me just, explain a couple things. She's saying, listen, I know it was your wife's home. I know she inherited it from her parents, but now it belongs to you. And I'm your wife. And I have a right. I have a right to inherit this home when you die. It's not fair that I will be kicked out once you die. Right? I spent so much time redecorating this house and putting up paintings and painting the wall and moving the furniture. I decorated this house. I should inherit this shit. Fucking sense of entitlement. So she's saying, I deserve it, right? I mean, and I'm a housewife. I'm not working. I stay at home while you go to work. So if and when you die and I get kicked out, I have nowhere else to go. I'm going to be homeless. You as my husband are obligated. It is your moral responsibility to make sure that I am financially safe after you die. That's what she's saying. All right, let's continue. She says, he said that it would be incredibly unfair to his daughter and his late wife if I inherit the house, and his wife would have never wanted that. His wife died unexpectedly at a relatively young age before she got around to making a will, so my husband automatically got the house as per inheritance laws. There's a couple words I want to explain there. She says, his wife died unexpectedly at a relatively young age before she got around to making a will. So to get around to doing something, it just means eventually doing something, especially after a long time. So your wife might ask you, when are you going to finish painting the back of the house? And you might say, oh, I'm going to get around to it. I'll get around to it, which means eventually I'll do it. You know what I mean? I'll get around to it. So she never got around to making a will. She never wrote specifically in that legal document, this is what I want to happen with the house and my car and my diamonds and blah, blah, blah. So as per inheritance laws, her husband got the house. Now the term or the phrase as per, A-S space P-E-R, as per, is just a fancy way of saying according to or in accordance with. So let me read it again. His wife died unexpectedly at a relatively young age before she got around to making a will. So my husband automatically got the house as per inheritance laws or in accordance with inheritance laws. Let's continue. He also explained that I am the sole beneficiary of his life insurance, and any savings left will be equally divided between me and his daughter. So basically, when he dies, he has a life insurance policy that will come into effect, and his wife will receive a large sum of money. It'll actually be divided between his daughter and his wife. So she may not get the house, but she's certainly going to get some money. So she says, however, I don't think this money would be enough for me to survive the rest of my life, especially as my husband plans on having expensive cruises and holidays for the rest of his retirement. Now, a cruise is a trip or a vacation on those gigantic ships. They move incredibly slow, but it's basically like a hotel on the water, right? They've got music and movie theaters and restaurants, and it's just a bunch of little rooms that people sleep in, but the rest of the time they're just partying and having a good time. But it's all in this gigantic boat in the middle of the ocean going from one city to another. That's a cruise. So she's saying, okay, I'm going to get money from the life insurance policy, but I don't think it's going to be enough, especially considering that my husband wants to do expensive things in his retirement. So we're just not going to have enough money, and I'm not going to have a house to live in. That's what she's saying. So let's continue. She says, this is where, unfortunately, our argument escalated and we started yelling at each other. I told him he was screwing me over after everything I have done for him, after I gave up my job and my career for him to look after our home, and that I deserve to be compensated. Man, this fucking lady. There's nothing more manipulative that a person can say than after everything I've done for you, you're going to do me like this. That is such a fucking manipulative thing to say, dude. It just makes it so clear that you weren't doing it because you wanted to or because you love me. You were doing it because you expected me to do something in return. You know what I mean? And now you're throwing it in my face because you're not getting what you want. I fucking hate that shit. So she says, unfortunately, our argument escalated, which means it increased in intensity. The argument got more intense and they started yelling at each other or shouting at each other or screaming at each other, right? Talking very, very loudly out of anger or frustration. So they're fucking yelling. That's yelling, right? So they started yelling at each other, and she said, you are screwing me over. To screw somebody over means to betray them or treat them very unfairly. You'll also hear people say fucking me over, but that's much stronger and much more vulgar than screwing me over, right? So she basically said, you're betraying me. You're treating me very unfairly after everything I've done for you. After I gave up my job, meaning I quit my job and my career for you because you wanted me to look after the home. So I deserve to be compensated. I deserve to be rewarded or given something in exchange for the sacrifice that I've made. That's what she's telling her husband. So she goes on to say, he retorted that he never asked me to become a housewife, and it was completely my own choice, that I knew the risks and benefits and made an informed choice, and he will be leaving a reasonable inheritance, and if I'm not happy with it, I should go back to work. I like this guy. So the word retorted is a very, very, very formal word. I guess to me, it's very formal. It just means to reply in a very sharp and even angry way. So remember, they're yelling at each other, they're arguing and shit. And she's like, listen, after everything I've done for you, I quit my job and gave up my career and stayed at home and let you pay all the bills while I did nothing. I should be compensated for that. And so he retorts or responds by saying, listen, I never asked you to become a housewife. That was your choice. You knew the risks, you knew the benefits. You made an informed choice. And I'm going to be leaving you a reasonable inheritance, right? You will benefit from the life insurance policy. And if you don't like it, go back to fucking work. All right, let's continue. She says, I told him I never knew that I wouldn't get the house and that it's late for me to return to work after being out of work for over 10 years. And I said that he's an asshole for leaving me stranded like this and that this is not what I agreed to and that he's being a sexist prick by not recognizing my contribution to our family. Man, this dude needs to get a fucking divorce. She says, I told him that I never knew that I wouldn't get the house and that it's late for me to go back to work after 10 years. I told him he's being an asshole for leaving me stranded like this. To be stranded means to be left without the ability to move from that place. So if you leave somebody on an island with no way of getting off that island, you have left them stranded. So now, metaphorically speaking, she's saying, look, I've been out of work for 10 years. I haven't had a job in 10 years. And we live in this house together. And when you die and give it to your daughter, I basically have nowhere to go and nothing to do. I'm 47. I can't get another good job that pays enough money. I can't find another place to live. You're leaving me stranded, right? You're abandoning me, is what she's saying. You're a fucking asshole for leaving me stranded like this. And this is not what I agreed to. I said that he's being a sexist prick by not recognizing my contribution to our family. Man. I'm sure you know what sexist means, right? Discriminatory against the opposite sex. But a prick, Prick, a prick is slang, vulgar slang, for a very unpleasant or contemptible person. You really only hear this word used with men. You typically don't call women pricks. And also, prick is slang for penis, or dick, which is slang for penis. So if somebody calls you a prick, it's similar to them calling you a dick or an asshole. It's all very similar, right? So she said she called her husband prick, a sexist prick for not recognizing her contribution to the family, which apparently was redecorating the house. That's the only thing I've seen here that she's contributed. And he's giving it to his daughter. So how is that sexist? You know what I mean? He's giving it to his fucking daughter. Anyway, man, before I leave my comments, let's finish out this story. So after she said this, you're being a sexist prick for not recognizing my contributions to the family, he laughed at me, saying I never made any kind of financial contribution, as we hired cleaners and housekeepers to do most of the chores, and if anything, I was a drain by all the money I spend. Honestly, at this point, I was so enraged and in tears. I screamed at him that he is being completely cruel to me, and I locked myself in the guest room. So, am I the asshole for wanting the house if my husband dies before? I'd have to say yes, you're the fucking asshole in this case. What do y'all think? I think she is totally out of line here, bro. Completely out of line and emotionally manipulative as well. Fucking calling him names and trying to shame him into giving her the house. After everything I've done for you and this family, you're a sexist prick. That's fucked up, man. So let me just recap that last part. He laughed at me, saying I never made any kind of financial contribution, as we hired or employed, same thing. We hired cleaners and housekeepers to do most of the chores. Now, chores are just like those regular daily tasks around the house that you need to keep the house in order. Sweeping the floors, washing the dishes, doing the laundry, taking out the trash, stuff like that. These are chores. So apparently they hired housekeepers and cleaners to do all that stuff for them. And if anything, she was a drain because of all the money that she spent. Now, a drain in this case is something that causes you to continually lose something, in this case, money. So if she's draining all the money from the family, she's spending all the family's money, basically draining the account. All the money is being sucked out of the account the same way that water is sucked out of a sink or a bathtub through the drain, right? So he's saying you didn't make any financial contribution. If anything, you are a financial liability. You are a drain. All the fucking money you spend. Money that I'm making, by the way, because you stay at home. You don't work, right? And so she says, honestly, at this point, I was so enraged and in tears. Now, to be enraged just means to be extremely angry, right? It's related to the word rage, which is extreme anger. So to be enraged means to be extremely angry or furious, right? So I was enraged and in tears. Now, if somebody's in tears, it just means they're crying, right? So she was angry, she was crying, and she screamed at him, which is it's basically the same thing as yelling, basically. It's just like in some context, one word sounds better than the other, but it's practically the same thing. Yelling is usually out of anger. Screaming could be out of anger or sadness or fear. You know, so they're similar. They're practically the same. It just depends on the context. But she screamed at him and said that he's being completely cruel, and she locked herself in the guest room like a fucking child. All right, so that's the end of the story. Is she the asshole? What do you guys think? I say yes, bro. 10 out of 10, fucking asshole. Now before we close out this episode, I actually was reading some of the responses on this post because again, the whole point of this subreddit is you tell your story, you ask people, am I the asshole? or not. And then a bunch of people can respond with their opinions saying, yes, you are the asshole or you are not the asshole. So I was looking through here and I found some pretty good ones. So let me read those to you now. This person says, yes, you are the asshole. And in capital letters, he says, it is not your house. He explained it to you. It was first his wife's house, and his reasoning for giving it to his daughter is sound, meaning it's solid, it's valid. And he puts in parentheses, it was her grandparents' house, for goodness sake. It should stay in the family. Would you leave it to her when you died? Or would she lose out on the property her mom inherited? And 47 is not too old to go back to work. Heck, I know people who change careers at that age, so stop with your excuses. Of course, this also reads like it's fake, so my response above is only for reality and not rage bait, which this looks like. Oh, I see what he's saying. So that last line, he's basically saying, I don't know if this is like a real story. This sounds fake. Maybe you're just trying to um, get engagement on the platform by expressing rage and anger. So he's saying my response to this is only based on the idea that this is actually true. That's all he's saying. All right. So let me read the next one. This guy says, she can easily go to work. She just doesn't want to. I'm guessing that this is fake because according to her quote unquote contributions she makes are looking good for him and redecorating the house. They have someone who cooks in the morning and cleans the house. This is ridiculous. Also, the fact that this dude is only 65 and she's already planning on his death and her inheritance is quite disturbing. I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's normal to think about death, right? I mean, if he's 65, he's not fucking 16 anymore. So I think it's normal to think about what happens if he dies. Even if you're 30 or 40, it's normal to think about that, at least to me. And what's going to happen with all the possessions? Who gets what? How is it going to be divided? Who's responsible for this and that? How much is the funeral going to cost? Blah, blah, blah. Because the reality that we don't like to think about is we could die at any time, anywhere. So I don't think that just considering what would happen after his death is a red flag. But the way the story is told, there's really no consideration for the fact that, okay, he's going to die and I'm going to lose my partner. It's more like he's going to die and I'm going to lose my house. That seems to be the most important thing in this story. And I think that is a little disturbing. That's a red flag, right? So this next response, he says, in quotes, I put so much time into this house. He's saying that ironically. So then he says, yeah, 10 years out of the daughter's 30 years. And all you did was redecorate. You picked a guy who came with the house already. You didn't go house hunting. You redecorated what a dead woman left behind, Jesus, and then acted super rageful over being told who was the rightful owner. I get that her job was stressful, but she landed herself in a honeypot of a marriage with a guy that didn't demand she stay at home, or that if she did, she'd take care of things. It seems that she spends more than she should, and she's feeling bitter that she's not in the kind of quote unquote take care of me relationship that she thought she was. I hope she cleans up her act and goes back to work. These motherfuckers are not at all convinced that she's the victim here. All right, last one. She really messed this up. She was in her 30s when she met a wealthy man. She should have used her new cash cow, meaning a large source of money, meaning her husband. She should have used this new cash cow to build herself up instead of wasting it on presumably knickknacks, which is like useless things that you buy for the house, little statues and pictures and paintings and shit like that, furniture, vases and stuff. Those are little knickknacks for the house. So she should have used her new cash cow to build herself up instead of wasting it on presumably knickknacks for a house that isn't hers and lavish trips. Lavish is like luxurious, you know? So it sounds like he could have funded for her to go back to school and gain more knowledge so she could enter the workforce above minimum wage or even start her own business or something. You can't be a housewife with no kids and no actual housework being done. That's a good point. You can't, what he's saying, because a housewife is the wife that stays at home while her husband goes to work and makes all the money. Typically, the housewife stays at home because the kids need to be taken care of. And since she's at home, she also keeps the house clean. She cooks dinner, does laundry, etc., etc. He's responsible for the money. She's responsible for the house and the kids. So he's saying you can't be a housewife if you have no kids and you're not even doing the fucking housework because you guys paid people to clean the house. At this point, she kind of sounds lazy and entitled. I can't imagine living with some No, I can't imagine living without some type of goal or purpose to work towards, especially knowing her husband was old and would most likely bit the bucket before she did. What? Oh, he probably meant to write bite the bucket. And the expression is kick the bucket. I don't know why he said bite the bucket. So that last sentence, especially knowing her husband was old and would most likely kick the bucket before she did. Now, to kick the bucket is an expression that means die. I don't know where it comes from, but what I think of when I hear it is somebody who's committing suicide. Like maybe you've seen in the movies where they hang a rope from the ceiling and then they stand on top of a bucket or a chair, but let's just say a bucket. And once they kick the bucket from under their feet so they can no longer stand on it, there's so much space between their feet and the ground that they're literally just hanging until they die. So that's what it means to kick the bucket, to die. Not It doesn't mean to commit suicide. That's just what the image. That's just the image I have in my mind when I hear it. But to kick the bucket just means to die, and this is further illustrated when you hear the term bucket list. Your bucket list is the list of all the things you want to do before you kick the bucket. Your bucket list is all that stuff you want to do before you die, right? All right. So then what's interesting is after all these people left these comments on her post, basically shitting on this woman, saying, you are the asshole, you entitled fucking child. Just go back to work. You know what I mean? You don't deserve anything. She actually came and made an edit to her post, right? Maybe she changed her mind. She saw the light. She realized what was wrong with what she was saying. Okay, so I'm going to read that to you now. She says, okay, I got it. I am the asshole. I will apologize to my husband and try to look for a job. This time, something not so stressful and something I will enjoy and build my own savings, meaning the amount of money she has saved in the bank account. I do not want to divorce my husband and take half. I honestly didn't marry him for money. I didn't even know that he was wealthy until 6 months into our relationship. Honestly, when I met him, I was done with dating and so jaded with men after being cheated on quite a bit. Surprise, surprise. Until he came along and honestly kind of swept me off my feet. He was so thoughtful, kind, and loyal, and our socio-political opinions just matched. We saw the world in a similar manner, and I never thought I would be with someone much older, but he was everything I have ever wanted. I used to work in customer service jobs, and in my last job, I was a 999 call handler. I don't know where she's from, but I'm assuming she means 911, which is the number that you call in the United States when there's an emergency. You call 911. Give me the police, an ambulance, the fire department, whatever. Maybe in her country it's 999. So she's saying I was one of the people that answered the phones at this institution, and it was really bad for my mental health, and I made minimum wage. My husband encouraged me to do something I enjoy. Oh, I read that wrong. My husband encouraged me to do something I enjoy instead, as he saw how it stressed me out. Although I did intend to find a more relaxing job, honestly, yeah, I enjoyed being at home and pursuing hobbies and doing things at my own pace. Of fucking course you did. Who wouldn't, man? I admit it was a really comfortable life, and I let him financially take care of me and become financially dependent on him. It was way easier than the grading and the grinding. And what she means by that, it was way easier than working extremely hard, because to grind is slang for working extremely hard. So staying at home and pursuing hobbies and letting your husband pay for everything is easier than grinding at a job, is what she's saying. She says, I had grown really attached to the house, which I wouldn't have done had I known it wouldn't ever be mine or that I would be kicked out of it at some point. I honestly didn't know it belonged to his late wife's parents, and I was just so shocked and blindsided. I just thought his wife's name was on the deed as she was the main earner at the time, meaning she made more money than her husband at the time. But yeah, I realize it's completely my fault for assuming that and that I was acting entitled. I will apologize to my husband and my stepdaughter. And there you go, man. That's as fucking childish as she started this story, fucking entitled, and man, there's so many derogatory terms I could use in this context. But I'm not here to judge this woman. I'm just saying it's just, I'm not gonna lie to you. Reading the story, I was slightly disgusted. But even still, we're all human, and I'm sure I've done and said disgusting shit as well. So I'm not judging her. I'm just saying, as poorly as the story started, I do want to commend this woman, praise this woman, congratulate this woman um, for what she's doing. She actually went online and said, listen, here's the situation. I need another opinion. Let me know. Am I tripping? Am I the asshole here? Am I wrong? And then when people gave her the feedback and said, yes, you are an entitled, childish little asshole, and you're fucking crazy to think that this family home is somehow like you have the right to this fucking place when it's been in the family for generations, right? It's not even your husband's family. It came from his wife's family. So it's only right that it goes to his daughter and not you. And then you try to emotionally manipulate the guy, saying, after everything I've done, I quit my job for you. I redecorated the house and you're not going to give the house to me, right? I think that's the ugly part. You know what I mean? The emotional manipulation. You sexist prick. I have a right to this house. You have a responsibility. No, you have an obligation to take care of me financially when you die. You know? But even after all that, she came back, she took the feedback, she read the responses, and she realized, okay, I understand I'm the asshole. I was wrong. I was making assumptions. I was acting entitled. It's only right that the family keeps that house. It's only right that it goes to his daughter and not to me. I just need to find a different job, less stressful, build my own savings, and take care of myself. I'm an adult and that's what I should do. So you really gotta, it's easy to shit on people like I just did in situations like this, but I really do appreciate the fact that she is open minded and humble enough to take the criticism and realize and admit, not only realize, but admit that she was wrong and that she plans to apologize to her husband and her stepdaughter for her actions. It's really important, man. It's easy to shit on people, but if they're willing to learn, if they're willing to have their mistakes corrected and be called out on their bullshit and try to grow as people and do things better, you can't punish people for that, right? Obviously, simply saying sorry doesn't fix everything, but I think it's that humility and the willingness to accept that you're wrong and apologize for it and then try to do better and be different. You have to reward people for that. Because if you only shit on them and tell them they're a fucking asshole, they're entitled and blah, 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 you don't solve the problem. You just hurt their feelings. You hurt their ego. They probably are going to get even more angry and frustrated with you. And now the relationship is just damaged. It's not going to ever get any better. There's just resentment and frustration in between you and this person. But if they demonstrate that willingness to humbly accept their mistakes and try to do things better and apologize for the mistakes they've made or the way that they've hurt you or tried to manipulate you in some kind of way, and they prove with their actions after that they mean what they said, you have to reward people for that, man. Because we're human. We make mistakes. We say dumb shit. We get selfish sometimes. We make assumptions and all these things. And so I will say I appreciate the way this story ended and how she kind of came to the realization that she was fucking tripping on this one, man. She was fucking tripping. But what do y'all think? What do y'all think about this story? Is this woman, or was this woman the asshole in this situation? Did she have was there anything valid about what she said initially? Right? She quit her job to take care of the house, to be the housewife and do all these, I can't even say do all these things because she wasn't doing shit. She was just like pursuing hobbies. You know what I mean? So I can't, but I'm still asking, is there any validity to what she said? Does her husband have some kind of obligation to make sure his wife is taken care of after he dies? Maybe she did have a right to the house. I don't know what you think. I'm asking. What do you think? Let me know, man. Hit me up on Discord. Start a conversation about the episode. And we can talk about it because obviously if you're married, this is something you'll have to consider at some point. Especially if you have kids or if you marry into a family, right? Like you marry a man who already has kids. You marry a woman who already has kids, it gets tricky. It gets tricky, right? Even just writing a will and saying, this is what I want to happen with all my stuff after I die. Especially if you have multiple kids, right? You imagine you have one house but 3 children. Who gets the house? How is the money divided? Do you leave it all to your kids? Do you leave it to your wife? Do you leave it to your husband? Like, it's interesting to think about. And I'm kind of glad I won't have to think about that for many, many more years. I'll be honest. I'm glad I don't have to think about that yet. But it is interesting to consider. So yeah, like I said, hit me up, man. Let me know on Discord what y'all think about this episode and about this story, and if you think this lady is the asshole. All right, but that's it for now, my friend. I hope you've enjoyed yet another episode of Real English Radio. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.